This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
With the Capital One Venture Card, you earn unlimited double miles on every purchase every day. And you can use those miles toward travel expenses like flights, hotels, rental cars, and more. Just book and pay for your travel using your Venture Card and redeem your miles toward the cost. Capital One. What's in your wallet? Credit approval required. Capital One Bank, USA, N.A.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Radio 1's Screen Time.
Hello and welcome to Radio 1 Screen Time, the movies and TV podcast hosted by yours truly, Ali Plum, Radio 1 and 1Extra's film critic. On this particular Friday edition of the podcast, we have one thing. That's right, one thing. Just one beautiful, wonderful thing. Ali Plum's Film Club, where Empire Magazine deputy editor and 80s comedy expert, yep, it's true, Nick DeSemlian, generously stops by to talk Ghostbusters in spoilerific and occasionally sweary, I should point out, but you know Ghostbusters, detail. Before we do that, I'd love to remind you that in cinemas this weekend, we have newcomers in the form of In the Heights, which is a musical that's written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, amongst other people. It's directed by John M. Chu, and it stars Anthony Ramos, who is incredible, Corey Hawkins, Leslie Grace, Melissa Barrera, the list goes on and on. It is a great musical, and if you love musicals, don't think twice. It's about a story of a corner in the predominantly Dominican Republic, Washington Heights neighborhood of Upper Manhattan in New York, and they all in this community dream of a bigger, better life. Again, it's called In the Heights, and critics are falling over themselves to say how great it is. We've also got The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. This is the sequel to the 2017 Odd Couple, Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson action comedy thriller, The Hitman's Bodyguard, and you can look forward to a podcast interview special this weekend with stars Ryan Reynolds and Salma Hayek, as well as director Patrick Hughes. They are on great form, so look out for that one in your podcast feed this weekend. Then there's Luca, Pixar's latest on Disney+, and we have a podcast interview special for that one coming up as well this weekend. We are being very, very generous, we know. And yeah, no news once again, I apologise, as I am on holiday for a long weekend. Apologies, and also well done me. But anyway, this chat with Nick is great fun and full of facts. I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoy talking about all of the Ghostbusters films. There are many references and... Look, it's Ghostbusters, and we're talking about busting of the ghosts, and you know how that makes everyone feel good. So I am sounding the spoiler alarm, and I'm sounding the those sensitive to strong language and adult content alarm as we talk Ghostbusters, all of them, with the wonderful Nick DeSemlian.
Hello, Ghostbusters. You do? You have?
Nick DeSemlian of Empire fame, please introduce yourself, better than that, and maybe get us started on a Ghostbusters chat.
Empire fame, I can't beat that. Well, yes, I am deputy editor of Empire Magazine and the writer of Wild and Crazy Guys, a book about 80s comedy, and my third claim to fame, I have worn Rick Moranis' squash shorts, albeit only for a brief time.
What? Was he on his way to an accountant's convention by any chance?
Alas not. No, I was in New York to interview him, and we got caught in a rain shower. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to dry your jeans." So he, while he put my jeans in his dryer, he let me wear his squash shorts, and it was amazing.
I've always loved that guy. Absolutely amazing human being, as are all of the people in Ghostbusters. I mean, it's an incredible cast. I mean, at the time, what was it like to be a young person, a young adult perhaps, going, "Oh, have you heard about this Ghostbusters movie? It's got Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, it's directed by Ivan Reitman, there's Danny Aykroyd, how about, whilst not a comedian, but still amazing, Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis." What was it like when this first dropped, Ghostbusters, in 1984?
I mean, it was insane. It was pandemonium, but I kind of missed all that. Like, I was too young. So it came out in 1984. I was 4 years old. I was not up on the sort of the terminology, the ectoplasm and all that. I didn't see it. I don't think I saw it until I was 8. I think I saw it on my 8th birthday, and I'd been badgering my parents to let me watch it, but they were like, "No, it's far too scary. which, fair point.
Yeah.
It's very scary when you're 8. So I finally got them to relent on my 8th birthday. And after I saw it, obviously I was completely enthralled. I didn't fully understand what the lady ghost was doing in Ray's bed. I didn't get the complexities of that at the time, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it terrified me, like properly terrified.
You have echoed exactly pretty much how I felt about it. I also wasn't around when it first dropped, but I kind of have read around it, and it was a phenomenon instantly. We're talking Michael Cera and Jonah Hill times 10 when Superbad was arrived, right? Where they couldn't go anywhere without every single line being chucked at them. Like Bill Murray retired essentially for 4 years to get away from Murray mania. It was an unstoppable force. And I think it's interesting that it's had this massive legacy. Like it's had a sequel, obviously, then it had a reboot type thing. What was it, 5 years ago? And now we've got the new film coming out later this year, directed by the son of the original director. So Ghostbusters never really left us, not really, because these first 2 films are so rewatchable. Then you've got the video games, the Lego sets, the cartoons, which were a big thing for me as a kid, like the real Ghostbusters, so called, and then the extreme Ghostbusters. Dare I say it, they were my Ghostbusters. Like, for whatever reason, that was what I was allowed to watch, because like you say, this first film is scary, and I've seen many quotes from many people involved with this movie who've said it's an adult film. It's aiming at adults, and maybe some kids can enjoy it too. But kids, Halloween, for years and years and years, still to this day, it's the get up, stick it on, boiler suit, make some sort of sticky back plastic, Blue Peter style, proton pack, maybe a bit of a Hoover. It's still very much in the public consciousness, helped in no small part by Ray Parker Jr.'s theme tune. It's just, how do you really put a lid on Ghostbusters? It was, and is, almost like nothing else. Although it is partially based kind of on the Abbott and Costello capers, but with a more of a modern twist for 1984. I just think it's important to flag out what an absolute institution it is.
And I just don't think they saw it coming. Like the president of Coke, who owned Columbia at the time, the studio, hated the film.
What?
He was like, and even Aykroyd, you know, when I've interviewed Aykroyd about this film, who wrote the script, the original script, which then it became more kind of less insane and more filmable when he teamed up with Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis. But he, in the middle of shooting, was worried and was like, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And it was Bill Murray, who was actually the least enthusiastic to start with, who was like, yeah, it's working. Don't worry, Dan. It's good. You're making something good. So he was kind of like the first one to realize.
Fascinating, because obviously since then it became a bit of a lodestone, a bit of a weight around his neck. And he hasn't wanted to come back. And then he came back for that cameo in the reboot. And he's meant to come back for this fourth one. It is the Bill Murray show, rewatching it in 2021. I am astounded at how willing, it seems, all other parties are to let Bill Murray just be Bill. He's easily, by a country mile, the funniest and most important part of the puzzle. But I read somewhere that the original script was a much darker, like, super expensive, it would cost like $300 million type movie, where it was much bleaker, and Chevy Chase said no because this is way too bleak. And then it ends up being much more palatable. It becomes a PG movie, albeit with, as you referenced earlier, ghost naughtiness, which as a kid, how did I explain that away? How on earth did I watch that with parents to one side and go, well, that's a belt being unbuckled. Okay, don't know what's going on there. He seems rather, I want to say, happy. And the jokes with Bill Murray and Sigourney Weaver, where she wants him inside her. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I rewatched it yesterday, and I'd totally forgotten that. Like, so he's introduced like electroshocking some poor guy who's done nothing wrong, but he's trying to pick up this much younger student, Bill Murray, and then he goes to the library, and they're sort of interviewing the poor librarian who's just been traumatized by this ghost, and Venkman, Bill Murray, says, "Are you menstruating?" It's just like, on paper, this character is horrendous. Like, if the wrong actor had played this part, it would have just sunk it. But Murray gets away with everything. Like, you just totally forgive him everything he says.
He's like a sly, lovable charmer with this incredibly deadpan wit who, like you say, just gets away with it. He has this magic spell. To me, as a child, as a young adult, this is Bill Murray. This is the Bill Murray I know, and everything else is kind of aping it. Like previously we had Stripes and Caddyshack.
Meatballs, which was
Meatballs.
Also with Ivan Reitman. So we've done a couple with Ivan Reitman already. But you're right. This was like this took it to the next level. Like seriously took it to the next level.
We've talked about Groundhog Day previously on the podcast, and there's a bit in your book which is fascinating about how that all came together. But it's so bizarre how a movie can become perfect or beloved almost by accident. Their decision to make this a PG movie would on paper right now sound like a terrible decision. You'd be like, what are you thinking? Make it scary. What's wrong with you? But I think it really rides the line, because my recurring nightmare as a child, there were two of them. One was this stuffed parrot that was at the end of my brother's bed. I don't know why we had it. Always nightmares. And then there was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Wow.
I cannot tell you how much that freaked me out. But to many audiences, that must have been really funny. But there's something about the way it was shot. They've set up a real world where you genuinely believe these ghosts kind of exist, whilst also coming in the shape of Slimer.
Yeah. With Stay Puft, there's like one shot of his face where you see him, like he looks like really cuddly and cute. And then there's one shot where he's like got this nightmarish look on his face and you just go, wow. And it's just like on screen for 2 seconds, but that makes that go, yeah, that's probably the thing that gave you nightmares.
That was tattooed onto
it's like Slimer as well. Like Slimer is scary when you first see him, like floating around in the hotel. He's like the scary thing in that scene, but then he becomes their sidekick and, in the second film and he's suddenly funny and the film does such a good job of that. The first 10, 15 minutes of this film is like played almost completely straight. And it's essentially like a sequence from Poltergeist. It's genuinely terrifying. And then the music makes you relax a bit. It's got the comedy music, but it's constantly, like you're saying, like whiplash. It's going zigzagging between genuinely scary, like properly scary, like scarier than like most 18s. There's stuff in this film that is strong. And in the second film, which I defend, but it never goes too far.
Yeah, I don't know.
They always pull it back.
I don't know quite how they do it, but it is a miracle. And I think it manages to my eyes, to my 21st century eyes, to maintain that subversive, ironic, kind of late night TV, witty vibe to a major blockbuster, a special effects vehicle. It is quotable, witty, and it's not just going, you know what, here are some special effects, shut up. It's actually quite, restricted and reserved when it comes to going, hey, here are the proton packs. It takes a long time, at least it felt a long time, for them to get together and get busting some ghosts. And I think it's interesting, I don't know whether you mind telling the story of how Ernie's character was going to be much bigger in original versions of the script.
Yeah, there's legends that Eddie Murphy was going to play that role and turned it down. And depending on who you talk to, different people have different versions of that. But yeah, definitely Winston was going to be a bigger part. He was going to come in during the hotel sequence and be introduced there. As it is, he comes in late. I really like Winston. I think he still works, even though he doesn't get as much to do. He's kind of he's the audience surrogate.
Yes.
So for kids, these are like three scientists, even though, that's stretching it a bit with Venkman, the word scientist. He's a terrible scientist. That guy's completely right.
I would say he's more of a used car salesman or perhaps a game show host.
Yeah. At the beginning when they get expelled from the university and the guy is ranting at them, the guy is right. Like almost all the people who are, the antagonists, the human antagonists of the Ghostbusters are right. Walter Pecker's got a point. Like they are like shoddy and they're cutting corners and they're like big kids running around with these nuclear like things on their back. Like it's insane. But yeah, you totally side with them because they're funny. But yeah, Winston is the guy that you connect with. I think he comes in. He doesn't really care about the science. He's just in it for the paycheck, and he's just in it for the fun. And he's got one of my favorite scenes in the film where it's just him and Ray driving around at night. Never worked out why it's the two of them. Like, where have they been? Do they go and bust ghosts like in duos? I don't know. But there's a really lovely scene where it hasn't got any jokes in, but it's just the two of them talking about the afterlife and about, is this the end of the world? And it's just a really creepy, cool scene.
I agree. That's a really standout moment, which as a kid, I remember thinking, there don't seem to be any jokes here. And speaking of the adult side of things, boy, do they smoke a lot in the first one. They smoke and they swear, plenty of S words. One of my favourite lines is, "I've seen blank that'll make you turn white. That'll turn you white." I love that stuff. I love that refreshing, yeah, they're eggheads. This is some crazy smashed potato going on here. Please take this seriously. And obviously the big line in that very same scene is cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria.
So many great lines. Just one up.
Can I confess something, though? When first time I watched it, and yes, I was petrified of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, I didn't find it funny. I was too young for the humour. I only saw it as an adventure. I only saw it as the end of the world. I only saw it as Sigourney Weaver being turned into a dog, and that bit, which is obviously meant to be Close Encounters, and then there's that awful, talk about grown-up moments, where dogs' puppeteer hands start groping at her, and she's turned around in a seat. Yikes. And then goes straight through that door. I was just there for the adventure. I was there for the will they survive and what will our friends do to survive the hour. And then as a teenager, I went, oh, this is brilliant. This has that special something. And I got into the Bill Murray thing.
It's very deadpan. It's very Canadian, the humour. Like a lot of these guys are Canadian, and I think that's like a big part of it. It doesn't have the big, broad, slapsticky, silly, whoopsie, it does have some of that. It's got people getting slimed and it has got like the physical comedy. But so much of it is the deadpan little throwaway, wry little witty lines that are just, the stuff about the sponge migration in the first scene and listen, do you smell something? Like little things like that
yes.
You kind of go, what? And it's only when you're watching it like the fifth time that you're like, that is genius.
Listen, do you smell something? Just unstoppably good. And the stuff about the private sector, they expect results, because this movie is essentially a poke in the eye, a jab in the, a tweak of the nose of anyone who's even slightly bureaucratic. Yeah. Because whilst What's His Chops, who would eventually be in Die Hard, as would, what's that actor's name?
William Atherton.
Yes, but the prison guard is also in Die Hard.
Reginald Val Johnson.
Thank you so much.
He was up for Winston.
Yeah, oh really? And then got given that role. Oh, interesting. I just find it interesting that it's all about, could you stop telling us what to do, man? Like you say, we've got nuclear power plants on our back, but we're okay. We know what we're doing. When you really look at it, whilst they shouldn't have turned off the ghost containment unit, what he's doing doesn't not make sense. They're non-government funded, overseen maniacs.
They are maniacs. I mean, Egon is a maniac. It's weird. When I saw it as a kid, Egon was like the grown-up scientist who's obviously incredibly smart, and you're kind of like, he's the authority figure from the Ghostbusters. But when you watch it again, he's an absolute nut job. Like almost everything he says is insane. And you just take him seriously because he's got glasses and he looks like an adult. But the film is anarchic. Like it's total anarchy. And, you look at a lot of these 80s comedies, Stripes and Meatballs, they're all anarchic. They're all just kicking back against grown-ups and against authority figures. And Ghostbusters is 100% that. And I think that's why it connects with kids, because you watch it and the Ghostbusters are like kids, and they're kind of got more in common with the ghosts than they do with the other humans. Like, because they're like the ghosts, they're forces of chaos who just get unleashed wherever they go, and they're eating fast food and they're playing pinball, and they're just like, they're ridiculous, but they're so relatable when you're a little kid.
For sure. And I also really love the tiny character moments you see throughout the film. For example, one of the best moments I have ever experienced watching a movie is, "We got one!" Absolutely love it. And I think, and I maintain this, it's an absolute disgrace what happened with Annie Potts from the first film to the second. I had quite the crush on the original Annie Potts. And then something out of Flintstones for me. I don't understand it. But when Bill Murray is going down the fireman's pole, exactly what you're saying, because this is a Batman knockoff. They're in their own lair. They've got, wait for it, 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 arcade machines in the background. Why? Was that part of their bank loan? Anyway, when he's going down the pole, he brings his Chinese takeout. And it's that sort of character grace note that really appeals to me. It also shoves one in the eye to, wait for it, intellectuals. How can this movie have its ghost cake and eat it quite the way it does? I don't know. But the stuffy violinist musician that's kind of sort of hanging out with Sigourney Weaver, what a dweeb. How do they... This is the magic of the cast and the script, is they've made a kind of improv festival with Bill Murray that lets him just be so charming and wonderful that you go, yeah, what a dork. Anyway, I'm just going to hang out with my science friends and shoot ghosts into a box. This guy's going to explain Twinkies.
The cast is nuts. I mean, everyone, no matter how tiny a character, every character's been worked out. Every character gets little funny things to say. Even when they're in the mayor's office, the mayor gets something funny to say. Like, what kind of comedy gives the mayor when the priest comes in and they do a little formal greeting and the mayor's like, hey, and he's like slapping him on the face and they're like fist bumping each other. And it's just like ridiculous how funny it is. And you know, a lot of it was improv, but the scripts, you got to give credit to the script because they were starting out from a place where every line, there's nothing wasted. There's just zingers firing off. And, you know, Rick Moranis, as great as the 3 or 4 main guys are, it's Moranis for me. Like, he just kills me every single moment he's on when he's got that colander on his head. He's talking to the horse and just all that stuff. And he's saying exposition, which you can't figure out if it's meant to be actual exposition or whether it's just nonsense.
So true.
But he is so funny. And this was like his breakthrough thing. Like, he hadn't really done anything before. And it was meant to be John Candy.
That's it. John Candy was going to get that role. Wasn't there something where John Candy wanted to have 2 German dogs and speak with an accent and all sorts of nuttiness? And it's a bit like, no.
Might have worked. You never know, but yeah, he insisted on 2 large dogs, apparently, but there's enough dogs in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
There's 2 big dogs already.
We want more dogs. We've got Sigourney Weaver turning into a dog, and she has said since that kids in the street would go, were you really a dog? Were you a statue for a bit? No, I actually wasn't. And I kind of like how you've got practical effects being used, like the magician's trick of her floating in the bed or above the bed. Obviously, a lot of the special effects haven't aged well, but I put it to you that they kind of, in their own way, have aged well, because the ghostbusteriness of colander on the head means that I love seeing the matte effect of everything in the background and knowing that's probably papier-mâché and that was done with a bit of hope and glue. I like that. That's part of the charm. So, you know, you read some really sniffy reviews of this movie from 1984. Don't get me wrong, critically acclaimed. Like, loads of people loved it. But the sniffy reviews were going, special effects, though, really? And I'm like, this is so high concept. This is so fun. This is so 4 mates having a laugh. Like, the bit that really made me realise I'm in love with this movie is the cowboy-style phrases they say to each other as they power up their proton packs. Like,
heat them up.
Yeah. And that's compounded now by something I know you love too, Nick, which is the epic rap battles of history, where it's the Mythbusters versus the Ghostbusters.
Genius.
Just, if you haven't seen it recently, or haven't seen it ever, type in epic rap battles, Ghostbusters. That's what will pop up. There's a line involving, they set up a laser grid with no safety switch.
Walter Peck was right. That's some shady shit.
Yeah, that's it.
It's great. I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to recommend it as well. It is so funny. The attention to detail is brilliant. If you've ever wanted to see Mr. Stay Puft in a rap battle, go watch it right now. It's listen to this.
Glorious. Let's just jump though to the sequel because it came out a few years afterwards, to say the least, and it has a different tone. And I've said on Twitter the moderately baity, conversation starty statement, which is I find that I want to rewatch the second one more readily than I do the first. I think the first one is much slower than I remember it being. I'm not saying it isn't brilliant, but I am saying for more of those cheap, playable, knockaboutable laughs, Ghostbusters 2 has this more polished, manufactured tone, which, depending on my mood, is often what I want. And it's just got more gags and has more for Ernie Hudson. What is your take on Ghostbusters 2?
I really like it. I'm a real Ghostbusters 2 apologist because most people, including the people who made it, are not huge fans. You know, it's Bill Murray didn't want to make it at the time. It's the reason we've only had 2 Ghostbusters films with this cast is because Murray didn't want to make another one. they talked him into it, and it took them a while to figure out what it was going to be. At one point, it was going to be about a baby that moves like an adult, but that was abandoned for being too horrifying, I think was the quote.
Right. So they just went long on slime.
Yeah, baby slime. And then, they ended up making another story in New York. In a way, it's a rehash of the first film. They have to kind of start at the beginning again. They have to reform because they're all kind of, gone their separate ways, and they have to reform, and they're still in New York. And instead of Stay Puft, it's the Statue of Liberty. So in a way, it's kind of recycling the first one. But what I really love about it is I think the plot is more streamlined. Like, my one issue with the first film is that the plot is quite confusing, I would say. You've got an architect called Ivor Clandor, and you've got Gozers, and you've got minions, and and it's all a bit hard to follow, maybe.
Keymaster, and then you've got the gatekeeper, and then they need to kiss, apparently, which as a child I was very confused by. I was like, was this part of the plan? All right. There's
a haunted skyscraper, and it's Vince Clortho, his name. And it's a little bit all over the place, I think. Whereas with the second one, hey, it's a haunted painting. There's an evil dude in a painting, and he wants to come out the painting, and there's a river of slime. And I think actually the second one has got some really kick-ass, cool, creative ideas in it, and some really cool visuals, like the fur coat that comes alive in the montage.
Oh,
that's.
I read somewhere that was an idea from the first film that they couldn't make happen, and then they put it in the second, but I'm really glad they did. I really like when the photographs catch on fire, and it's got this really genuine threat feeling of, oh, whoa, no, this is bad. And then Ernie Hudson just kicking the door in.
Scary, yeah. Again, it's a scary, genuinely scary scene, and I think I've got to be in the same room as that actual painting. It's at ILM in San Francisco, and I've got to pose in front of it, and it looked a bit like he was looking at me when the photo was taken. But I think it's underrated. If you've been writing it off all this time, have another watch, because I think it's actually dated pretty well.
I agree. I like it a lot, and I think there is that clunky element of, like you say, resetting everyone. They can't be soar away successful, but the way they do it feels very natural. You would be sued to high heaven. You'd be called heroes, and then everything and everyone that you touched, which was a lot of Manhattan, is torn apart, blown up, smashed to bits by a giant blob of marshmallow. Yeah. I kind of like that stuff. The whole Sigourney Weaver has a baby with a new husband, but she's divorced him, and is there a will they, won't they? That kind of, I don't know, His Girl Friday style. They were together, but now they're not, but this isn't their child. Oh, I don't know. It's cutesy, but I kind of like it. I think I've already mentioned Annie Potts, but I think Rick and her are nice together in their own goofy way, and they find room for them in the movie. I think seeing Rick Moranis in the uniform that doesn't quite fit him, lighting it up. I love it.
Give Rick Moranis a proton pack, for God's sake. Yeah, he's earned it.
And the fact that he is their lawyer, like, one of my favourite scenes is obviously the courtroom.
Yes.
It's got about 5 or 6 big stinking jokes, like proper this is a joke, about lawyers, about judges, about lots of different things. But I think it's a different sort of joke than to the first film. It's got a prevalence of, oh, there it is, set up, punchline. Whereas in the first movie, you've got more kind of sly, phrasing.
Yeah, the ghosts are great in the second one. I love the two criminals in the electric chairs that are kind of floating around and flipping chairs up, and that's a really cool set piece. And then, much like Stay Puft kind of haunted your childhood, the bathtub scene where the slime comes out of the tap really freaked me out for ages. I remember, whenever the bath was being run, I'd have to run in and check if slime was coming out. So I think there's some really cool original, like, mood slimes. Just a fun idea. It's cool.
I like that idea, and it kind of actually says something. It is a very direct metaphor for New Yorkers fighting each other. It's a very angry place. I'm walking here. Other cliches are available, but yeah, it's kind of fun. I love the sudden realization that you've got these 3 improv comedians. Why haven't they been actually bouncing off each other that much in the first film? Where in the second film, they're trying to drill in the middle of the road, and they all become improv comedians and start going, yeah, no, Tony down the yard says I gotta work tonight. And you go, yeah, no, that's kind of what I was expecting more from the first film as an adult.
Egon going full Bronx is fantastic. Just Egon trying to be a tough, like, construction worker is so good. It's so good.
Egon was always my guy, and I think that is in no small part thanks to the cartoon, where he has blonde hair.
And he's ripped. He's like muscly, and he's got like a six-pack.
Yeah, he's like a lad. I wanted to be him. I think if you put us side by side right now, there's, I like to think, some similarities. But as we're talking sequels, we've got the 2016 Ghostbusters, and now we've got the upcoming 2021 Ghostbusters Afterlife, which we'll see. I don't want to give away too much, but it has been reported a number of different members of previous Ghostbusters movies coming back as their previous characters, rather than, what did they do again in the third film? Like, Bill Murray came back as some sort of...
He was a kind of paranormal debunker who got thrown out the window by a ghost and died. And Aykroyd was a taxi driver. And I think there was a statue of Harold Ramis. And I can't remember if Bernie Hudson was in it. But they all were kind of... None of them were playing themselves. But yeah, they're going to be back, obviously, apart from Harold Ramis, who's sadly not with us anymore. But yeah, apparently this is the real spiritual sequel. This is the real kind of love letter to the first one. It's directed by... Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman. He directed the first two. And, I got to interview him quite recently, and he was saying how, as well as the comedy, he really wants to bring back the horror, and he really wants to make it scary and properly scary, which excites me, because I think that was something about the 2016 one. I thought it had plenty of funny bits in it, but it was played very broad and quippy and didn't really didn't try to be a serious kind of horror film in any way.
Yeah, I really do have some problems, if not a lot of problems, with the 2016 Ghostbusters. I think, frankly, the idea was not a good idea. And by that, I mean, it feels like such an easy win to have them be a franchise in another city that is failing. That feels so natural to me. But kind of rejigging the whole concept yet again, I think was a mistake. And there was something about that kind of was a problem throughout, because all of the ingredients I was on board with. Everyone that was cast, I'm a fan of. It just didn't come together, and I haven't rewatched it, so I don't actually have that many interesting thoughts on the third one. But all I can tell you is that there were scenes that I was going, this is great. This Chris Hemsworth stuff really tickling my funny bone. And then other stuff where I was like, what are you doing here? Where is this?
I'm a big fan of Kate McKinnon in the film, and yeah, Chris Hemsworth is fantastic. With his monologue about his dog, who's named Mike Hat, and which I think is the standout scene. But Kate McKinnon is so funny in it as well. That there are lots of funny bits, but I think it was a bit tame. It's in New York again. They didn't try and make it its own thing. It was trying to kind of model itself too much on the first one.
If we rewind back to the first Ghostbusters, can we talk more about our favourite bits? Because I personally adore when the tarmac crumbles and crushes and then they come out of it again.
When I watched it again this week, that moment gave me the biggest goosebumps. I actually got a bit teary. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is like the 30th time I've seen this film. But when they fall down and the taxi falls in after them and everything goes quiet and the music fades and then the music kicks back in again and they come out and everyone's cheering, and it's just such a great moment. And it's really because it's just a beautiful film about New York, and it feels really heartfelt, despite all the sarcasm and the deadpanness. It is heartfelt. It's got a heart. It's a film that's got a heart. And, it starts off with everyone against them and everyone is, combative. And then by the end, everyone is cheering Ghostbusters and everyone's come together, and you've got like the rabbis and the preachers. And it's so ludicrous, but it works. That's an amazing scene. There are so many great scenes in this film. The terror dog, if we're talking about horror, the terror dogs are, I don't know if there's anything in cinema that scares me more than the terror dogs.
Interesting.
And I think it's because the effects are not very good. There's something about the effects and the stop motioniness. They make them like more scary than if they were photoreal. There's like these horrific things when it comes out of Moranis' apartment. And man, it's so, I can't even talk about it. I'm getting too frightened.
It's a very interesting, eminently rewatchable, amazing film that got away with it. It has this scrappy nature where it got away with it. It's too scary, it's too subversive, but somehow it's also mega mainstream.
Yeah. Do you think it would have been as big without the theme tune? Because the theme tune was famously, they rejected a whole bunch, and then it came together like right at the last minute. And Ray Parker Jr.
If you could tell us a bit more about that, because I saw on your Twitter feed, because bless you, of course, you rewatched this movie for the podcast, and you found this incredible clip where Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, and this is Dan Aykroyd's baby, more or less, were selling the film to distributors in Las Vegas, where they have this convention and they decide, well, how many of our cinemas will we let show X movie or Y movie? Could you talk a bit about that video?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, Dan Aykroyd is being relatively serious. We should say quickly that one thing that makes this film work is that Dan Aykroyd took all this stuff absolutely seriously. Like, he believes in the paranormal, he believes in ghosts, he will talk your ear off, and he has talked my ear off about, you know, the most detailed sort of spectral stuff. His dad has written the history of ghosts. I mean, this is a big Aykroyd family obsession. So his absolute fervor for all of this stuff, and he brought all the crazy technical, you know, jargon that you get in the film. And then you've got Bill Murray, who kind of just came on set, doesn't believe in anything, just anarchic and just throwing out jokes. And you get that perfectly in this video. And they were asked to do a promotional video for exhibitors, and Dan Aykroyd's trying to sell it. Bill Murray is not being that helpful. He says makes E.T. look like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is absolute like nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. And it's a very funny video.
It reminds me of the poster tagline for Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which is makes Ben-Hur look like an epic.
It's along those lines. It sounds good, but it's completely meaningless. So he's being very meta. And then if you watch the full version of that, he's basically implying that if exhibitors buy this film, then the Ghostbusters team will send prostitutes to their hotel rooms. So I mean, he's going a bit off script. But then at the end of this video, you get this little snippet, like 10-second snippet or 5-second snippet of a theme tune. At the time, it was the theme tune for the film, and then they ditched it. But in sample lyrics, cool heads under fire, never mess with the Ghostbusters. And it's interesting.
It's so funny that it was a last minute thing, because it is now, well, up there with Flashdance and a number of other like classic Empire phrase here, pop busters, where the song is arguably bigger than the movie and has almost as an enduring legacy. The dance, there was a dance, the idea that the main thrust is just shouting the word Ghostbusters. Just think about that for a second.
Well, it's like everything to do with this film. It kind of was just a fluke that kind of lightning struck. The story is that Ray Parker Jr. was trying to come up with this tune, and he couldn't come up with anything. And he was in a hotel room, and he stayed up all night. And at 4:30 in the morning, the TV was on, and there was an advert for a drain company. And he watched this advert for a drain company, and it had a little jingle. And that's how the Ghostbusters theme tune was born, because he was just like, right, I'm going to do that. So he took this terrible advert and turned it into a piece of gold, a piece of ear gold, if you will. The video, the song is amazing. The video has got Chevy Chase doing something weird with a cigarette, and John Candy. I mean, it's magical. It's magical.
If you compare it to Bobby Brown's On Our Own from Ghostbusters 2, I, for whatever reason, when I was rewatching Ghostbusters 2, accidentally left the subtitles on. And it really reveals the lyrics to Ghostbusters 2's Bobby Brown On Our Own. Right. Too hot to handle, too cold to hold. They're called the Ghostbusters and they're in control. Had them throwing a party for a bunch of children, all while the slime was under the building. So they packed up their group, got a grip, came equipped, grabbed their proton packs off their back, then they split. Found out about Vigo, the master of evil. Try to battle my boys. That's not legal. I just...
There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, is it illegal? Is there like a law banning like a master of pink slime from 14th century Carpathia from tormenting the Ghostbusters? I'm not convinced. But yeah, you don't really need to see the film after listening to that. It's all there, isn't it?
And Run DMC, I mean, just the cash-in opportunities were through the roof.
So great.
Anyway, what have we forgotten to bring up when it comes to Ghostbusters? What will we be beaten to a pulp with for not having mentioned?
We haven't talked about Sigourney Weaver. And, you know,
let's talk about her some more.
It's very much a boys' club, this film. It's almost entirely a male film, apart from Janine and Dana, and they're both amazing. But I think Sigourney Weaver does such an amazing job at kind of being the foil of Bill Murray, while also being brilliant in her own right and pretending to be a human dog and pretending to be possessed by some kind of evil spirit and pretending to be terrorized by furry hands coming out of her armchair. And a scene that looks like it was probably quite harrowing to film.
Oh, yeah, no, like I was saying, that is properly not okay, hun. Like, that is definitely an adult situation, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. She can maybe not whip back a one-liner for every single one he says, but without her knowing smile and her willingness and her ability to be charmed on screen by Bill, a lot of that stuff is kind of
not okay,
super duper sleazy and not okay, hun, at all. But their chemistry together feels right.
She's crossing swords with him from the very start. You know, she has that amazing line, "We both have the same problem, you." And it's one of the best lines in the film. But she knows exactly what he is. And he's trying to kind of do his kind of con man hustle on her. And right from the beginning, she sees through it. And she's not sort of tricked by him, but she also kind of has a bit of a soft spot for him. And you can see that like slow thawing, and it sells it completely. And you believe that Venkman is a better man by the end of the film because of her performance, but then obviously he's not at the beginning of the second film.
And as a kid, when they kiss, I remember going, "Yay!" Whereas normally it's like,
yeah, you're buying. Yeah, even as a kid, you're rooting for these two to get together. It's like normally the romance in these films is the boring bit. You want to fast forward to get to the cool bits. But in this film, it's hilarious. Like every time they're on screen together, it's full of zingers and yet doesn't feel like, you know, it's throwing out ad libs. It feels real. She feels like a real character. So Sigourney Weaver is fantastic. I don't think it's Ghostbusters without her. And she's back for the new one too.
I was going to say, she's back for the new one. Did she pop up in Ghostbusters Answer the Call?
She does pop up. She does pop up in the 2016 film. She plays the mentor of Kate McKinnon's character, who's got the same crazy hair and is eccentric and so on. So she rocks it in that film too.
Oh, no, she's so brilliant. I mean, I'm so glad you brought her up because she really is fantastic.
When I interviewed Ivan Reitman a while back for the 2016 film, he talked about them wanting to do Ghostbuster sort of spin-offs. He said you could have a one in China with the kind of supernatural stuff that you get that's specific to China. You could have one in England that is...
Oh, Loch Ness Monster. They refer to it. Do you believe in the Loch Ness Monster when they're interviewing Ernie Hudson as Zeddemore? And I'm like, yeah, let's have that.
Would watch.
Let's properly do that.
Would watch. But even without these characters, you could absolutely take Ghostbusters and you could do it anywhere. It's such a like simple, genius idea of just having these guys who are like exterminators who are just happen to be getting ghosts, but they treat it like a 9-to-5 job. And it's not like, for them, it's not like Indiana Jones where it's his calling and he's obsessed with the supernatural. It's like for these guys, they're clocking in and clocking off, and it's like a ghost is just something to tick off their list before they go out for like dinner. And that's another part of the genius of it, is that they are not driven. They're not obsessed with the lore and the supernatural. They're really flippant about it.
Well, at least Bill and Ernie Hudson are very like, let's just get the rats from out of the basement. Whereas Egon, I'm mixing character and actor names here, and Dan Aykroyd are going, "Ooh, look at the slime. Ooh, ectoplasm. Save some for me." But anyway, I think in summary, we can say that Ghostbusters, good film. Ghostbusters 2, good film in a different way. Ghostbusters 3 is a film, and Ghostbusters 4 is coming out later this year.
I'm excited. Are you excited? Are you excited for it?
I am. I'm nervous on behalf of Jason. I'm the idea of directing a movie that is a sequel or a legacy spin-off sequel to something that was one of your father's biggest achievements is nerve-wracking to me. But Paul Rudd, I'll watch anything he's in. I absolutely adore him. And I have high hopes. I have medium hopes, let's say, because once bitten, twice shy. And like I said before, all the ingredients were good for the 2016 Ghostbusters, and all the ingredients are good here. Even the Minion-style mini Stay Puffs actually quite please me in a way that if you told me about them, I'd go, really? But in the moment, you go, yes, that's actually, that advert's working for me. And the young kids look like they can act too.
I'm just happy we're living in a world where within 6 months, we're going to see Indiana Jones back on the big screen in his fedora and jacket, and Peter Venkman hopefully back in his Ghostbusters jumpsuit. I mean, it's nuts. It's like the 80s kids in us are just going, how is this happening? It's
cats and dogs living together. Mass hysteria. Nick, it's been a sincere pleasure. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And, be careful with those spooks and spectres out there. And if you do need to call someone, don't, because they're not real.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Thanks for listening. Almost, nearly to the very end. I just want to say a couple of the reasons why Egon is my fave. We've got the whole Do, Re, Egon. Love that. Always makes me laugh. Then we've got lines like, how is he these days? Peter, well, he was borderline for a while, and then he crossed the border. How about the, we had part of a slinky, and then I straightened it? I just love it. How about the epididymus and the, I'm terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought? There's definitely a very slim chance we'll survive, and I feel like the floor of a taxi cab. I just love him. I always wanted to be Egon. And yes, that may in part be thanks to the cartoon. All right, let's put a lid on it, as I so often say. Let's put a bow on this. Let's wrap it up. Thank you for listening. Be good to yourself. Have a great rest of your day, and stay safe out there. I love you lots. Goodbye.
You name it. No. Yes. I love cake.
Guys,
Keep being fabulous.
Radio 1 presents the Gemma Collins podcast.
You can get a slice of the GC every week to see what I get up to and who I get up to it with. All right, mate. I'd describe it as pink fabulousness direct to your ears. This is Gemma Collins, New York, Paris, Milan, Rome, LA.
The Gemma Collins podcast.
Listen on BBC Sounds.